My name is Aria Foster. I'm 31 years old, and I just discovered that my chronically unemployed sister Madison has been using my identity to purchase a $1.2 million mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in Dallas, then had the audacity to laugh in my face when I confronted her about the theft, saying, "Prove it. I'm already living here, and possession is 9/10 of the law." What she didn't know was that every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, and every cruel admission of guilt was being meticulously documented for the federal investigation that would destroy her fake dream life in the most public and humiliating way possible. I've spent the last decade building my career as a senior financial advisor at Goldman Sachs, managing portfolios worth over $50 million, and earning a reputation for integrity and expertise that had made me one of the youngest partners in the Dallas office. My financial discipline and professional success had given me an 820 credit score, substantial savings, and the ability to finally purchase the home I had been dreaming of for years. A beautiful Victorian house in the historic Lakewood neighborhood that would be my sanctuary after long days managing other people's wealth. The house hunting process had been exciting and methodical, with my real estate agent showing me properties that matched my specific criteria for location, architectural character, and investment potential. After months of searching, I had found the perfect home. A fully restored 1920s Victorian with original hardwood floors, period fixtures, and a garden that reminded me of my grandmother's house, where I had spent countless childhood afternoons learning about flowers and finding peace in nature. Aria, my real estate agent Jennifer Martinez, had said, "This house is perfect for you. The seller is motivated, the inspection came back clean, and with your credit score and down payment, the mortgage approval will be straightforward. We should be able to close within 30 days. The confidence in her voice matched my own certainty that this purchase represented not just a real estate transaction, but a milestone in my personal and professional life. I had worked incredibly hard to reach a position where I could afford a home that reflected my values and provided the stability I had craved since childhood, when my family's financial chaos had taught me the importance of building security through careful planning and responsible choices. My childhood had been defined by the stark contrast between my approach to money and responsibility and my younger sister Madison's complete inability to manage any aspect of her financial or personal life. While I was working part-time jobs in high school to save for college, Madison was maxing out credit cards our parents had foolishly given her and expecting them to pay the bills when she inevitably spent beyond her means on clothes, entertainment, and whatever impulse purchases caught her attention. The pattern had continued throughout our 20s, with Madison cycling through jobs, apartments, and relationships, while accumulating debt, legal problems, and a credit score that made her essentially unbankable for any significant financial transaction. Meanwhile, I had focused on building my career, maintaining excellent credit, and creating the kind of financial foundation that would allow me to achieve long-term goals rather than just surviving from one crisis to the next. "Madison just needs to find her path," our mother Carol would say, whenever I pointed out that my 28-year-old sister had never held a job for more than 6 months or demonstrated any ability to support herself independently. "She's creative and free-spirited. Not everyone can be as focused on money and success as you are, Aria." The implication that my financial responsibility was somehow a character flaw rather than a strength had always frustrated me, especially when I watched my parents enable Madison's irresponsible behavior by constantly bailing her out of problems that were entirely of her own making. They would pay her credit card bills, cover her rent when she couldn't make payments, and provide emotional support that framed her failures as temporary setbacks rather than patterns of behavior that needed to change. Have you ever been made to feel guilty for being responsible while watching family members reward someone else's constant failures? That's exactly what I experienced throughout my 20s, as my parents treated my success as evidence that I didn't need support, while Madison's disasters proved she needed more help and understanding. The mortgage application process for my Victorian house had been routine until the day Jennifer called me with confusion and concern in her voice about an unexpected problem with my loan approval. "Aria, I need you to call me as soon as you get this message," her voicemail said. "There's been a complication with your mortgage application that doesn't make any sense given your financial profile. The underwriter has some questions about your current debt obligations, that we need to discuss immediately." The urgency in her voice was alarming because mortgage issues were typically related to employment verification, appraisal problems, or minor credit discrepancies that could be resolved quickly. But her tone suggested something more serious, and potentially deal-threatening had emerged during the underwriting process. When I called Jennifer back, the conversation revealed information that would change my understanding of my financial situation and my family relationships forever. "Aria?" Jennifer said, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to tell me. "The underwriter is showing that you already have a current mortgage on a property in Willowbrook Heights. According to their records, you purchased a $1.2 million home 8 months ago, and the loan is current with no payment issues. But obviously that creates a debt-to-income problem for the new mortgage you're trying to obtain. The information was so completely wrong that I initially assumed there had been a clerical error or identity mix-up in the credit reporting system. I had never purchased any property, never applied for a mortgage, and certainly had never been approved for a $1.2 million loan that would have been far beyond what I could afford, even with my excellent income and credit score." "Jennifer, that's impossible," I said, feeling the first stirrings of anxiety about what this error might mean for my home purchase. "I've never owned any real estate, never applied for a mortgage, and I definitely don't have a $1.2 million debt obligation. This has to be some kind of mistake in the credit reporting." "That's what I thought initially," Jennifer replied. "But I've pulled your credit report from all 3 bureaus, and they're all showing the same information. There's a Wells Fargo mortgage in your name, opened 8 months ago, with a current balance of $1.18 million. The property address is 2847 Magnolia Lane in Willowbrook Heights. The specificity of the information, the exact loan amount, the lender, the property address, suggested that this wasn't a simple clerical error, but something much more serious and potentially devastating to my financial reputation and home buying plans. "I need to see those credit reports immediately," I said, my mind racing through possible explanations for how my name could be associated with a mortgage I had never applied for. "Can you email them to me right now? I need to understand what's happening and figure out how to resolve this problem." As I waited for Jennifer's email with my credit reports, I began to feel a growing sense of dread about what I might discover. Identity theft was something I helped my clients protect against, but I had never imagined that it could happen to me, especially not on such a massive scale involving a $1 million mortgage fraud. When the credit reports arrived in my inbox, the information they contained was far worse than I had anticipated. Not only was there a $1.2 million mortgage in my name, but there were also multiple credit cards, a car loan, and various other accounts that I had never opened, all showing my social security number and personal information, but representing financial obligations I had never agreed to or even known about. The mortgage details were particularly disturbing because they showed a complete loan application process that someone had completed using my identity, including employment verification, bank statements, and financial documentation that must have been either stolen or fabricated to support the massive loan approval. But the most shocking discovery was the property address itself. 2847 Magnolia Lane in Willowbrook Heights was one of the most exclusive addresses in Dallas, a neighborhood where homes regularly sold for over $1 million, and where the residents were typically established professionals, business owners, and celebrities who could afford that level of luxury. As I researched the property online, I found listing photos and information about a stunning modern mansion with 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and luxury amenities throughout. The house was everything I had ever dreamed of owning, but it was also completely beyond my financial means, and certainly not something I had ever seen or toured during my house hunting process. The realization that someone had used my identity to purchase a mansion worth more than I earned in 2 years was both terrifying and infuriating. This wasn't just identity theft. It was a sophisticated financial fraud that had destroyed my credit, created massive debt obligations in my name, and threatened to ruin the financial reputation I had spent years building. But as I continued reviewing the credit reports and researching the property, a terrible suspicion began forming in my mind about who might have had access to my personal information and the motivation to commit such an elaborate fraud. Madison had been asking increasingly specific questions about my income, my job, and my financial situation over the past year, often framing her curiosity as sisterly interest in my success and career development. She had also been present during family gatherings where I had discussed my home buying plans, my mortgage pre-approval process, and the specific neighborhoods I was considering. More troubling was the timing of the fraudulent mortgage, which coincided with a period when Madison had been complaining about her living situation, her inability to qualify for apartment rentals due to her poor credit, and her frustration with having to live with roommates who she claimed were beneath her standards and social aspirations. The possibility that my own sister had stolen my identity to purchase a luxury mansion was almost too horrible to consider, but the evidence was beginning to point in that direction in ways that made other explanations seem unlikely. That evening, I made the decision that would either confirm my worst fears or eliminate the most painful possibility I could imagine about who had destroyed my financial security and stolen my dreams of home ownership. I drove to Willowbrook Heights to see the property that was supposedly mine according to the credit reports, hoping to find evidence that would either implicate Madison or rule her out as a suspect in the most devastating betrayal I could imagine from a family member. The drive to Willowbrook Heights was one of the most emotionally complex journeys of my life, as I alternated between hoping that Madison wasn't involved in the identity theft and dreading what I might discover if she was indeed living in a mansion purchased with my stolen credit and personal information. The exclusive neighborhood was exactly as luxurious as I had expected, with manicured lawns, security gates, and homes that represented the kind of wealth and success that took decades to achieve legitimately. When I turned onto Magnolia Lane and approached the address listed on my fraudulent credit reports, what I saw confirmed my worst fears and shattered any remaining hope that my sister wasn't responsible for the theft that had destroyed my financial security and home-buying dreams. Madison's distinctive red BMW was parked in the circular driveway of the massive modern mansion, along with several other expensive cars that I recognized as belonging to her friends and social circle. The house itself was even more impressive in person than it had appeared in the online photos, an architectural masterpiece with soaring windows, designer landscaping, and luxury details that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars beyond the base purchase price. But the most damning evidence was Madison herself, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she entertained guests in what appeared to be an elaborate dinner party in the home's grand dining room. She was dressed in designer clothes I had never seen before, serving wine from crystal glasses and playing hostess in a setting that was completely inconsistent with her actual financial means and employment history. The sight of my sister living in luxury purchased with my stolen identity was so infuriating and heartbreaking that I sat in my car for several minutes trying to process the magnitude of her betrayal and the sophisticated planning that must have been required to execute such elaborate fraud. Madison had not only stolen my identity and destroyed my credit, but she had also been living in the mansion for months while I worked overtime to save money for my own much more modest home purchase. She had been enjoying the fruits of my financial responsibility and professional success, while I remained unaware that my credit was being destroyed and my financial future was being stolen. As I watched her interact with her guests, laughing and obviously comfortable in her role as the mansion's owner, I realized that she had been planning this theft for months and had executed it with a level of sophistication that suggested she had researched identity theft techniques and mortgage fraud processes specifically to target my financial resources. The decision to confront Madison immediately was driven by both fury and a need to understand how she had gained access to my personal information and executed such comprehensive fraud without my knowledge. I walked to the front door of the mansion that was legally mine according to the fraudulent mortgage documents and rang the doorbell, preparing for a confrontation that would either result in her confession and cooperation or confirmation that she was willing to destroy our family relationships to maintain her stolen lifestyle. When Madison opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to defiance to cruel amusement as she realized that I had discovered her theft and was prepared to challenge her directly about the fraud she had committed. "Well, well," Madison said, her voice dripping with sarcasm and entitlement. "If it isn't my successful big sister coming to visit my beautiful home. What brings you to Willowbrook Heights, Aria? I thought this neighborhood was a little too upscale for your taste." The casual way she referred to the mansion as her home, while knowing it had been purchased with my stolen identity, was so audacious that I momentarily couldn't respond. She was acting as if she had legitimately earned the luxury lifestyle she was displaying, while simultaneously mocking me for discovering the theft she had committed. "Madison, we need to talk privately," I said, trying to maintain some composure despite my rage and shock at her attitude. "I know what you've done, and I know this house was purchased using my credit and personal information. We need to figure out how to resolve this situation before it gets worse." Her response revealed the full extent of her callous attitude toward the identity theft and her complete lack of remorse for the devastation she had caused to my financial security and home buying plans. "Prove it," Madison said with a cruel laugh, clearly enjoying my distress and the power dynamic she believed she had created through her theft. "I'm living here, I'm making the mortgage payments, and possession is 9/10 of the law. Good luck trying to take my house away from me, big sister. Have you ever confronted someone about a crime they committed against you, only to have them laugh in your face and dare you to stop them?" That's exactly what I experienced as Madison revealed that she not only had no intention of resolving the identity theft, but was actively challenging me to try to reclaim what she had stolen. The conversation continued on the doorstep of the mansion she had purchased with my stolen identity, with Madison becoming increasingly aggressive and contemptuous as she realized that I had discovered her fraud but hadn't yet taken legal action to stop it. "Besides," Madison continued, her voice rising loud enough that her dinner guests could probably hear the confrontation, "our parents are finally proud of me for getting my life together and achieving something significant. Are you really going to destroy my success just because you're jealous that I found a way to get ahead in life?" The characterization of identity theft and mortgage fraud as getting ahead in life was so morally bankrupt that I realized Madison had convinced herself that stealing from me was justified by her desire for a luxury lifestyle she had never worked to earn. "Madison, you committed multiple felonies to steal this house from me," I said, trying to make her understand the legal consequences she was facing if she didn't cooperate in resolving the fraud. "This isn't about jealousy or success. This is about identity theft, mortgage fraud, and federal crimes that carry prison sentences." "Federal crimes?" Madison laughed dismissively. "You always were dramatic, Aria. This is a family matter, not a criminal case. Nobody's going to prosecute me for borrowing my sister's credit to buy a house that I'm perfectly capable of maintaining and enjoying." The complete disconnect between the seriousness of her crimes and her casual attitude toward the legal consequences suggested that Madison had no understanding of federal identity theft laws or the likelihood that she would face prosecution if I reported her fraud to the appropriate authorities. As our confrontation continued, several of Madison's dinner guests came to the door to see what was causing the commotion, giving me an opportunity to witness firsthand how she was presenting her stolen lifestyle to her social circle. "Everyone, this is my sister Aria," Madison announced to her guests with obvious pride in her hostess role. "She's a financial advisor who's always been a little too focused on money and rules. She's having a hard time accepting that I've finally achieved the kind of success she always thought she deserved." The introduction was a masterpiece of manipulation, framing me as the jealous sibling who couldn't accept Madison's apparent success, while completely concealing the identity theft that had made her luxury lifestyle possible. "Madison has such a beautiful home," one of her guests said to me, clearly impressed by the mansion and Madison's apparent wealth. "She was just telling us about her interior design business and how well it's been doing. You must be so proud of your sister's transformation." The reference to an interior design business was news to me, suggesting that Madison had created an elaborate fictional background to explain her sudden wealth and luxury lifestyle to friends who didn't understand the source of her apparent success. As I realized the extent of Madison's deception and her complete commitment to maintaining the stolen lifestyle regardless of the consequences, I made the decision that would define our relationship and determine whether she would face accountability for her crimes or continue to benefit from her theft of my identity and financial security. "I need to go," I told Madison, ending the confrontation before it escalated further or created more public drama that might complicate the legal action I was already planning. "But this conversation isn't over, and this situation isn't resolved. You're going to face consequences for what you've done." Madison's response as I walked away from the mansion she had stolen from me would prove to be prophetic in ways she couldn't have imagined. "Good luck with that, Aria," she called after me, her voice filled with confidence and contempt. "I've got everything I need to keep this house and this life. You can't prove anything, and even if you could, who do you think Mom and Dad are going to believe? Their successful daughter who finally got her life together, or their bitter sister who can't stand to see someone else succeed?" The challenge in her voice and her confidence that our parents would support her over me revealed that Madison had been preparing for this confrontation and believed she had positioned herself to maintain her stolen lifestyle, regardless of my efforts to reclaim what she had taken. As I drove home from Willowbrook Heights that night, I felt a combination of devastation and determination that I had never experienced before. Madison had not only stolen my identity and destroyed my financial security, but she had also made it clear that she had no intention of voluntarily resolving the fraud or facing accountability for her crimes. The decision to pursue legal action against my own sister would permanently destroy our family relationships and create consequences that would affect everyone involved for years to come. But the alternative, allowing her to continue benefiting from identity theft while I suffered the financial consequences of her fraud, was unacceptable and would only enable her to commit additional crimes in the future. What Madison didn't know was that her confidence in her ability to maintain her stolen lifestyle was about to be tested by federal investigators who specialized in identity theft cases and had resources far beyond anything she had considered when planning her elaborate fraud. The weeks following my confrontation with Madison at the stolen mansion were among the most emotionally challenging and legally complex of my life, as I navigated the process of reporting identity theft to federal authorities while watching my sister flaunt her fraudulent lifestyle on social media and receive praise from our family for her apparent success and transformation. The first step in seeking justice was filing comprehensive reports with the Federal Trade Commission, the Social Security Administration, and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, providing detailed documentation of the identity theft and mortgage fraud that Madison had committed. The federal agents assigned to my case were experienced in sophisticated identity theft investigations and immediately recognized the seriousness of the crimes involved. Ms. Foster, Special Agent Rebecca Martinez of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, explained during our initial interview, "What you're describing represents multiple federal felonies, including identity theft, mortgage fraud, mail fraud, and wire fraud. The dollar amounts involved and the sophistication of the scheme suggest this wasn't an impulsive crime, but a carefully planned and executed financial fraud." The validation from federal law enforcement that Madison's actions constituted serious crimes was both reassuring and sobering, confirming that my decision to pursue legal action was appropriate, while also making clear that the consequences she would face could include significant prison time if she were convicted. But documenting the identity theft and building a case for prosecution required extensive financial investigation and evidence gathering that would take months to complete, while Madison continued to enjoy her stolen lifestyle and receive family support for her apparent success. Meanwhile, Madison was documenting her luxury lifestyle extensively on social media, posting daily updates about her life in the Willowbrook Heights mansion that served as perfect evidence of her enjoyment of the proceeds from identity theft and mortgage fraud. "Living my best life in my dream home," she posted on Instagram, along with professional quality photos of the mansion's interior that showed expensive furniture, designer fixtures, and luxury amenities throughout. "So grateful for this beautiful space and the opportunity to finally live the lifestyle I've always known I deserved." The posts were simultaneously infuriating and helpful for the federal investigation, providing time-stamped evidence of Madison's occupancy of the fraudulently purchased property and her awareness that she was living in luxury that was inconsistent with her actual financial means and employment history. But the most disturbing aspect of Madison's social media presence was her creation of what she called Madison's Design Diaries, a home renovation and interior design blog that presented her as a successful entrepreneur who had earned her luxury lifestyle through business success and design expertise. "Welcome to my latest project, transforming this gorgeous Willowbrook Heights mansion into the perfect blend of modern luxury and classic elegance," she wrote in her inaugural blog post. "As someone who's spent years developing my design aesthetic and building my business, I'm excited to share this journey with you as I create the home of my dreams." The fictional business narrative was elaborate and convincing, complete with before and after photos, design philosophy explanations, and client testimonials that were either completely fabricated or obtained through other fraudulent means. Madison was not only living in a home purchased with my stolen identity, but was also building a fake professional reputation based on renovations funded through the same identity theft. Have you ever watched someone build an entire false life on the foundation of crimes committed against you, while receiving praise and admiration for achievements that were actually your stolen dreams? That's exactly what I experienced as Madison's blog gained followers and her social media presence attracted attention from people who believed her success story was legitimate. The blog's popularity led to speaking engagements, design consultation opportunities, and media interviews where Madison presented herself as an inspiration for women who had overcome challenges to achieve their dreams through hard work and entrepreneurial creativity. Madison Foster's transformation from struggling artist to successful design entrepreneur is exactly the kind of story that inspires me, wrote a lifestyle blogger who featured Madison in an article about women who made it. Her willingness to take risks and invest in her vision has paid off in ways that show what's possible when you believe in yourself and work toward your goals. The media coverage of Madison's fake success story was particularly painful because it represented recognition and admiration that should have been mine if I had been able to purchase my own dream home through legitimate means, rather than having my identity stolen to fund someone else's luxury lifestyle. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of Madison's stolen success was the impact it had on our family relationships and my parents' perception of both their daughter's achievements and character. Aria, my mother Carol, called me several weeks after my confrontation with Madison. "Your father and I are concerned about your attitude toward Madison's success. She's finally gotten her life together and achieved something wonderful, but you seem determined to tear her down instead of being supportive and proud of her transformation." The accusation that I was being unsupportive of Madison's success, rather than seeking justice for identity theft, was so painful and unfair that I initially couldn't respond. My parents were treating Madison's crimes as achievements worthy of family celebration, while characterizing my victimization as jealousy and bitterness. "Mom," I finally replied, "Madison didn't achieve anything. She stole my identity and used my credit to purchase a mansion she could never afford legitimately. She's committed multiple federal crimes, and she's living a lie that will eventually collapse when the truth comes out." "Aria, that's a terrible accusation to make against your own sister," Carol responded, her voice filled with disappointment and disapproval. "Madison showed us all the business documents and financial records that prove she earned the money for that house through her design business. Just because you're having trouble with your own home purchase doesn't mean you should try to sabotage Madison's success." The revelation that Madison had provided fake business documents to our parents as proof of her legitimate success was both shocking and predictable, showing the extent of her deception and her commitment to maintaining the false narrative even with family members who should have been able to see through obvious lies. But more painful was my parents' complete willingness to believe Madison's fabricated explanations while dismissing my accusations as jealousy and sibling rivalry, rather than considering the possibility that their previously unsuccessful daughter might have committed crimes to achieve her sudden and dramatic lifestyle improvement. The family dynamics continued to deteriorate as Madison organized elaborate gatherings at the stolen mansion, hosting dinner parties, holiday celebrations, and social events that showcased her apparent wealth, while excluding me from family activities for the first time in my adult life. "Madison is having a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner at her home this year," my father James informed me during what would be our last conversation before the legal resolution of the identity theft case. "She's invited the whole family and several of her new friends from the neighborhood. She didn't include you because she feels like you've been trying to undermine her happiness. But you're welcome to apologize and join us if you can find it in your heart to be supportive of your sister's success." The expectation that I should apologize to Madison for being the victim of her identity theft, and that I should participate in celebrating her crimes by attending social events at the mansion she had stolen from me, represented such a complete inversion of moral responsibility that I realized my family relationships were beyond repair until the legal system intervened to establish the truth. As Thanksgiving approached, and I faced spending the holiday alone while my family celebrated Madison's fraudulent achievements, I received the phone call that would begin the final phase of the federal investigation and set in motion the events that would ultimately destroy Madison's stolen lifestyle in the most public and humiliating way possible. Ms. Foster, Special Agent Martinez called me. We've completed our preliminary investigation of the identity theft and mortgage fraud, and we're ready to move forward with search warrants and arrests. The evidence is overwhelming, and the case is strong enough that the U.S. Attorney's Office is confident about prosecution on multiple federal charges. The news that Madison would finally face consequences for her crimes was both satisfying and nerve-wracking, especially knowing that the arrests would happen in front of whatever family members and friends might be present when federal agents executed their warrants. But the timing of the federal action would prove to be even more dramatic and publicly humiliating for Madison than I had anticipated, as her confidence in her stolen lifestyle was about to be shattered at the moment of her greatest triumph and social visibility. The federal investigation had progressed rapidly. Once agents began examining the sophisticated nature of Madison's identity theft and the extensive documentation of her fraudulent activities that she had unknowingly created through her social media presence and public lifestyle. The evidence was so comprehensive and damning that prosecutors were confident they could secure convictions on multiple felony charges that would result in significant prison time and complete financial restitution. Your sister made several critical mistakes that have made this case unusually strong from a prosecution standpoint, Special Agent Martinez explained during one of our regular case updates. First, she documented her illegal lifestyle extensively on social media, providing time-stamped evidence of her enjoyment of the proceeds from identity theft. Second, she created fake business documents and tax records to explain her wealth, which constitutes additional fraud charges. And third, she's been making mortgage payments on the fraudulent loan, which shows ongoing participation in the scheme. The legal strategy was comprehensive and designed to ensure that Madison faced consequences for every aspect of her elaborate fraud, from the initial identity theft through the ongoing mortgage fraud and the creation of false business records to explain her sudden wealth to family members and friends. But the most important aspect of the investigation was the timing of the arrests and search warrants, which federal agents had coordinated to maximize the impact on Madison's false lifestyle and ensure that her crimes were exposed in the most public way possible. We typically execute warrants during times when we're most likely to find evidence and least likely to encounter resistance, Agent Martinez explained. But in this case, your sister has announced a major social event at the fraudulently purchased property that will provide an ideal opportunity to execute multiple warrants simultaneously while documenting her ongoing enjoyment of the proceeds from her crimes. The social event Agent Martinez was referring to was Madison's grand housewarming party, which she had been planning for months as the ultimate celebration of her apparent success and transformation from struggling artist to wealthy homeowner and successful entrepreneur. The housewarming party was scheduled for the weekend before Christmas, with invitations sent to over 100 people, including extended family members, neighborhood friends, social media followers, and business contacts she had developed through her fake interior design career. Madison had been promoting the event extensively on her blog and social media accounts, describing it as a celebration of her American dream success story and an opportunity to share her beautiful home with everyone who had supported her journey. Join me for the party of the year as we celebrate the completion of my dream home renovation, Madison had posted on Instagram, along with professional photographs of the mansion's holiday decorations and party preparations. This house represents everything I've worked for and dreamed of achieving, and I can't wait to share this special evening with the people who matter most to me. The irony of Madison celebrating a dream home that she had stolen through identity theft, while describing it as the result of her hard work and legitimate achievements, was both infuriating and perfect for the federal agents who would be arriving to execute search warrants during the height of her celebration. But the most satisfying aspect of the timing was that Madison had specifically excluded me from the housewarming party, sending invitations to our parents, extended family, and numerous friends, while making it clear that I was not welcome at her celebration due to my jealousy and negativity about her success. Madison asked me to let you know that you're not invited to the housewarming party, my mother had called to inform me, her voice suggesting that she supported Madison's decision to exclude me from the family celebration. She feels like you've been trying to undermine her happiness and success, And she wants this to be a positive celebration without any family drama or negativity. The exclusion from what was supposedly a family celebration at a house that was legally mine, according to the fraudulent mortgage documents, was painful, but also fitting, given that Madison's entire lifestyle was built on stealing from me, while simultaneously portraying me as the jealous sibling who couldn't accept her apparent achievements. As the date of the housewarming party approached, I worked with federal agents to finalize the timing and logistics of the arrests and search warrants that would be executed during Madison's moment of greatest social triumph and public visibility. The warrants will be executed at approximately 8 p.m., which should be during the peak of the party when the maximum number of witnesses are present, Agent Martinez explained during our final planning meeting. We'll have agents at the front and back entrances to prevent anyone from leaving during the search, and we'll have additional agents ready to process evidence and conduct interviews with party guests who may have information relevant to the fraud charges. Have you ever anticipated a moment of justice so intensely that you could barely contain your excitement about watching someone face consequences for crimes they committed against you with complete arrogance and impunity? That's exactly what I was feeling as the night of Madison's housewarming party arrived, and federal agents prepared to execute the warrants that would destroy her stolen lifestyle forever. The evening of Madison's housewarming party was crisp and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor elements of her celebration, and ideal conditions for the federal agents, who would be arriving to execute search warrants and make arrests during the height of her social triumph. I spent the day reviewing the evidence file one final time and preparing emotionally for the justice that was finally about to be served, after months of watching Madison flaunt her fraudulent lifestyle while I faced the consequences of her identity theft. From my apartment across town, I could follow the party's progress through Madison's enthusiastic social media updates and the posts from guests who were documenting their evening at what they believed was a legitimate celebration of her success and transformation. "The most gorgeous housewarming party I've ever attended," posted one of Madison's friends, along with photos of the mansion's lavishly decorated interior and the elaborate catering setup that Madison had arranged for her celebration. Madison has created such a beautiful home and life for herself. So inspiring to see someone achieve their dreams through hard work and dedication. The posts continued throughout the evening, showing Madison in designer clothes playing hostess in the mansion she had stolen from me, accepting congratulations for achievements that were entirely fraudulent, and basking in admiration from people who had no idea they were celebrating the proceeds of identity theft and federal crimes. But the most painful posts came from my own family members, who were documenting their pride in Madison's apparent success, while continuing to exclude and blame me for being unsupportive of her transformation. "So proud of my daughter Madison for creating this beautiful home and life for herself," my mother posted on Facebook, along with photos of Madison giving tours of the mansion to impressed guests. She's worked so hard to get to this point, and it's wonderful to see her dreams finally coming true. Some people just need to find their own path to success. The implicit criticism of me in the phrase, "some people just need to find their own path," was particularly stinging, suggesting that my parents viewed Madison's criminal success as superior to my legitimate career achievements and financial responsibility. As the evening progressed and the party reached its peak attendance, I received regular updates from Special Agent Martinez about the timing of the warrant execution and the final preparations for the arrests that would end Madison's fraudulent lifestyle forever. "All units are in position around the property," Agent Martinez texted me at 7:45 p.m. "We have visual confirmation of approximately 80-90 party guests throughout the house and grounds. The subject is currently in the main living room giving what appears to be a speech or presentation to the assembled guests. We'll execute the warrants at 8 p.m. as planned." The knowledge that Madison was giving a speech to her party guests at the exact moment when federal agents were preparing to arrest her for the crimes that had made her lifestyle possible was so perfectly ironic that I felt a sense of poetic justice about the timing of her downfall. At exactly 8 p.m., my phone rang with the call I had been anticipating for months. "The warrants have been executed," Agent Martinez informed me, her voice professional but with an undertone of satisfaction. "Your sister has been arrested on charges of identity theft, mortgage fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The search is ongoing, and we're processing evidence while conducting interviews with the party guests who witnessed the arrest." The news that Madison had finally been arrested for her crimes was both vindicating and surreal, ending months of frustration and legal preparation while beginning the process of justice and restitution that would restore my financial security and credit reputation. But the most satisfying aspect of Madison's arrest was the timing and public nature of her downfall, which had occurred in front of the largest audience possible during her moment of greatest pride and social triumph. How did the guests react to the arrest? I asked Agent Martinez, curious about how the people who had been celebrating Madison's apparent success had responded to discovering that her entire lifestyle was built on federal crimes. There was initial confusion and disbelief, followed by shock and embarrassment, as people realized they had been celebrating the proceeds of identity theft. Agent Martinez replied. Several guests asked to speak with agents privately because they were concerned about their own legal exposure from accepting gifts or services from your sister during the period when she was living off stolen funds. The revelation that some of Madison's friends and associates were worried about their own legal liability for benefiting from her fraudulent lifestyle added another layer of consequences to her crimes, showing how identity theft and fraud create ripple effects that damage multiple relationships and community connections. But the most immediate concern was the impact on my family members who had been present at the party and had witnessed Madison's arrest for crimes they had refused to believe she was capable of committing. Your parents were at the party and witnessed the arrest, Agent Martinez informed me. They seemed shocked and confused by the charges, and they asked several times whether there had been some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. We explained that the evidence against your sister is comprehensive, and that the charges are serious federal felonies that will likely result in significant prison time. The image of my parents watching Madison being arrested in handcuffs for identity theft and federal fraud, after months of supporting her supposed success and criticizing me for my accusations against her, was both satisfying and sad. They were finally seeing the truth about their daughter's crimes, but only after enabling and celebrating her fraudulent lifestyle while ostracizing me for being her victim. As the evening continued, and federal agents processed evidence from the search of the mansion Madison had purchased with my stolen identity, I began to understand the full scope of the justice that was finally being served and the comprehensive nature of the case that prosecutors would present against her. The search has yielded extensive evidence of ongoing fraud, Agent Martinez updated me later that evening. We found false business records, fake tax documents, forged financial statements, and detailed records of your sister's identity theft activities. We also found evidence that she was planning to expand her fraud to include additional credit cards and possibly another mortgage application. The discovery that Madison had been planning to commit additional identity theft beyond the mansion purchase was both alarming and validating, showing that she had viewed her initial crimes as successful enough to warrant expansion rather than as serious felonies that required her to stop and face consequences. But the most important outcome of the evening was the beginning of the process that would restore my financial security, credit reputation, and homeownership dreams while ensuring that Madison faced appropriate consequences for the sophisticated fraud she had committed against her own sister. As I reflected on the evening that had finally brought justice for Madison's identity theft, I felt a combination of relief, vindication, and sadness about the permanent damage that had been done to our family relationships through her crimes and our parents' refusal to believe the truth about her fraudulent lifestyle. The aftermath of Madison's arrest at her housewarming party was swift and comprehensive, as federal prosecutors moved quickly to formalize the multiple felony charges against her while beginning the process of asset recovery and victim restitution that would restore my financial security and credit reputation. The evidence collected during the search of the mansion was so extensive and damning that Madison's attorneys immediately began discussing plea bargain options, rather than attempting to mount a defense against charges that were clearly supported by overwhelming documentation. Your sister has been charged with 14 federal felonies including identity theft, mortgage fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy, U.S. Attorney Michael Roberts explained during our meeting about the prosecution timeline. The evidence is so comprehensive that we expect she'll plead guilty to avoid a trial that would likely result in an even longer prison sentence. The federal charges carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in prison, though the actual sentence would depend on Madison's cooperation with investigators, her willingness to make full restitution, and the court's assessment of the sophistication and impact of her crimes on the victims and the financial system. But more important than the criminal consequences was the immediate civil relief that allowed me to reclaim the mansion and restore my credit while Madison faced the financial ruin that should have been the natural consequence of her inability to legitimately afford the luxury lifestyle she had stolen. The court has issued emergency orders transferring ownership of the Willowbrook Heights property to you and freezing all accounts that were funded through the identity theft, my attorney Jennifer Walsh explained. You're now the legal owner of the mansion, and you can take possession immediately while the criminal case proceeds against your sister. The restoration of my property rights was both satisfying and surreal, as I prepared to move into a home I had never chosen, but that was far more luxurious than anything I could have afforded through legitimate means. The mansion represented both the return of my stolen dreams and an upgrade to my lifestyle that had been funded entirely through Madison's crimes against me. The media coverage of Madison's arrest and the identity theft case was extensive and damaging to her reputation, with business journalists and crime reporters providing detailed accounts of the sophisticated fraud she had committed and the elaborate false lifestyle she had maintained through stolen funds. Local interior designer arrested for $1.2 million identity theft scheme, read the headline in the Dallas Morning News. Madison Foster, who had gained attention for her luxury home renovation blog and apparent business success, was arrested at her own housewarming party on federal charges of stealing her sister's identity to purchase a mansion in Willowbrook Heights. The media reports included details about Madison's fake business credentials, her fraudulent social media presence, and the extensive documentation of her crimes that federal agents had collected during their investigation. The contrast between her projected image of legitimate success and the reality of her criminal activities was stark and publicly humiliating. But the most devastating coverage focused on the impact of her crimes on me as the victim, with reporters highlighting how identity theft had destroyed my home buying plans and financial security, while Madison enjoyed luxury accommodations purchased with stolen funds. Aria Foster, a successful financial advisor at Goldman Sachs, discovered that her sister had been using her identity to live in a mansion worth twice her annual salary, one reporter wrote. While Madison hosted parties and built a fake business reputation, Aria was working overtime to save money for a modest home purchase, unaware that her credit was being destroyed by family fraud. The public sympathy for my situation and the recognition of Madison's crimes was validating after months of being ostracized by family members who had refused to believe that their favorite daughter was capable of sophisticated federal fraud. Have you ever experienced the satisfaction of watching someone who betrayed you face public consequences that perfectly match the magnitude of their crimes against you? That's exactly what I felt as Madison's fraudulent lifestyle was exposed in the media, while I began the process of rebuilding my life in the mansion she had stolen for me. The impact on our family relationships was profound and permanent, as my parents were forced to confront the reality that they had supported and celebrated a daughter who had committed serious crimes while ostracizing the daughter who had been her victim. Aria, my mother called me several days after Madison's arrest, her voice filled with shame and confusion about how completely wrong she had been about both her daughter's character and achievements. We owe you an enormous apology. We should have believed you when you told us what Madison had done, and we should have supported you instead of celebrating her theft of your identity and dreams. The apology was meaningful, but insufficient to repair the damage that had been done to our family relationships through their support of Madison's crimes and their refusal to believe my accusations against her. They had chosen to believe elaborate lies over documented evidence, and they had treated my victimization as jealousy rather than seeking to understand the truth about the situation. "Mom," I replied, "you didn't just refuse to believe me about the identity theft. You actively supported Madison's fraudulent lifestyle, excluded me from family gatherings, and made me feel like I was the problem for being the victim of her crimes. Those choices have consequences that go beyond just this situation." Meanwhile, Madison's legal situation continued to deteriorate as federal prosecutors built an increasingly comprehensive case against her, with evidence of additional fraudulent activities that extended beyond the identity theft and mortgage fraud I had initially discovered. "Your sister has been charged with additional counts related to tax fraud and business fraud," Attorney Roberts updated me. The investigation revealed that she filed false tax returns claiming income from the fake interior design business, and she used forged documents to obtain business loans that she never intended to repay. The expansion of the criminal charges meant that Madison was facing potential prison sentences that could extend beyond 20 years, while the financial restitution requirements would ensure that she spent decades paying back the money she had stolen from multiple victims and financial institutions. But the most satisfying aspect of the legal resolution was the comprehensive nature of the asset recovery that restored not only my stolen property, but also provided compensation for the emotional distress and financial disruption that Madison's crimes had caused in my life. The court has ordered complete restitution, including the fair market value of the mansion, all fraudulent debt that was created in your name, interest and penalties on the stolen funds, and punitive damages for the emotional distress caused by the identity theft, my attorney explained. You're also entitled to attorney fees and court costs, which will be paid from the liquidation of any remaining assets in your sister's name. The financial compensation was comprehensive and appropriate, ensuring that I not only recovered what had been stolen, but also received recognition for the broader impact that Madison's crimes had on my financial security and personal well-being. 6 months after Madison's arrest, I was living in the Willowbrook Heights mansion that she had purchased with my stolen identity, working to restore my credit reputation and enjoying the luxury lifestyle that I had inadvertently acquired through her crimes against me. The house was beautiful, but came with complicated emotions, representing both the return of my stolen dreams and a constant reminder of my sister's betrayal and the family conflicts that had resulted from her fraud. Madison pleaded guilty to all federal charges and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with requirements for complete financial restitution and lifetime supervision upon her release. The sentence was appropriate for the sophisticated nature of her crimes and the extensive impact they had on victims and the financial system. Your sister will serve her full sentence without possibility of parole, Attorney Roberts informed me during our final meeting about the case. Federal sentencing guidelines don't allow for early release in cases involving sophisticated financial fraud, and her lack of cooperation during the investigation worked against her during sentencing. The finality of Madison's prison sentence provided closure to the legal aspects of her identity theft, while beginning the long process of rebuilding family relationships that had been damaged by her crimes and our parents' initial support of her fraudulent lifestyle. As I reflected on the year that had transformed me from an identity theft victim to the owner of a luxury mansion, I realized that the most important lessons from the experience weren't about crime and punishment, but about the importance of maintaining integrity even when family members choose to betray that trust in the most devastating ways possible. The house that Madison had stolen for me became a symbol of justice and the ultimate failure of fraud to create lasting success or happiness. Her attempts to build a life on stolen foundations had ultimately collapsed, while my commitment to legitimate achievement and legal accountability had been vindicated through the restoration of my rights and the comprehensive consequences she faced for her crimes. If you're reading this, and you're dealing with family members who have committed identity theft or other financial crimes against you, please know that you have legal rights and resources that can help you recover from their betrayal, while ensuring they face appropriate consequences for their actions. Identity theft by family members is particularly devastating because it combines financial fraud with personal betrayal, but it's also particularly prosecutable because family members often leave extensive evidence trails and have ongoing access to their victims that makes their crimes easier to document and prove. Setting boundaries with family members who commit crimes against you isn't cruel. It's necessary for protecting yourself and ensuring that they face consequences that might prevent them from victimizing others in the future. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to ensure they face accountability for their actions, rather than enabling them to continue hurting people through fraud and deception. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever discovered that family members were using your identity or financial information without your consent? How did you handle situations where relatives committed crimes against you, while other family members refused to believe the truth? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar betrayal and doesn't know that they have legal options for recovery and justice. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that your financial security and personal identity are worth protecting through whatever legal means necessary, even when the criminals are members of your own family. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.